Thanks for joining me. My name's Trevor Magnuson and I'm sharing my guitar building process. In this video we're going to be taking the back and the soundboard and joining them to the sides, creating a box. But before we do that, we have quite a few other things that need to be done first. Before we can attach the back, we've got the issue of these bracing pieces. I've marked the positions and we're going to need to cut channels here, 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 and the same on this side. And likewise at the front, we need equivalent channels for the two wing braces that stick out either side of where the bridge will be. Now when we're cutting these channels, if the cut lines happen to coincide with the gaps between these curved lining pieces, everything will be simple. It's never simple. And the problem is that as you cut, little pieces chip away, nobody will ever see, but it's untidy and we can do better. So what I'm going to do is once again break one of the cardinal rules of luthiery, and I'm just going to put a little drop of polyurethane glue there in between the cuts in the curved linings. That's going to provide support so that when we cut and chisel and file away for the channel, hopefully we'll have less breakage of the little pieces on either side. And again on the front. We only want the tiniest amount because we don't want it running down or anything like that. We just want it kind of sitting in the curved cuts where it will puff up, as polyurethane glue does, and just provide a bit of support so that when we cut away it won't chip. There is another more embarrassing problem that we need to address, and that is that when I was laminating the sides, it appears I was a little bit sparing on the glue and not diligent enough on the clamping, and that there is a little bit of separation here, here and here. Now this is not a problem structurally for the guitar, nor is it a problem for gluing on the top and the back. There is plenty of area to accept glue. But when we route the channels for the bindings, it may be that we will route back to a void instead of solid timber. So there are three things that we can do. One is pack the void with sawdust and then wick in some cyanoacrylate, super glue. On these very small ones, we may not even need to put sawdust in there. This one in particular is very, very fine. But there's a bit more of a gap here, and so I think our old friend polyurethane and a few little slivers of timber just poked down into that void should see us through. I'm using this little shaving to poke some polyurethane glue down into the crack, and then I'll just leave the sliver sitting there and poke in a few more either side of it. Polyurethane will foam up and fill the void, and then we'll trim it off and resand. While I was doing that, I was noticing that in the channels the polyurethane wasn't really filling the gaps between the curves as much as I'd hoped. So I just cut myself a few little more shavings of pine and wedged it in there, and that's going to work much, much better. And for the tiniest crack, the scariest glue. I'm worried that that will seep through the timber and affect the colouring, though in all likelihood it will seep through the pine but not the Tasmanian blackwood. while waiting for the forbidden glue to harden into that glorious sandable state, I cut this piece of curved timber, which I am going to glue here. This is so that if in future somebody wants to put a pickup inside this guitar, we've got a solid supported area where they can drill for the socket. I also made this. It has a curved side, a slanted angle there, and roundovers on these corners. And we're going to glue that here, nestled up against the side of the neck block. And that is because this is where I like to have my strap button. Well, our kerf buttressing and our void filling of shame have now been sanded smooth, top and bottom, and it's time for the part of the build that is the easiest to get wrong. You align the centre lines at the tail and the neck block, and then you draw on the edge where the braces meet, and then you cut a channel and you put it in, and it's wrong. It's twisted, or it's just unreasonably hard to get right, and I don't quite understand why. So the way we fix that is to cut these channels narrower than they need to be, because we can always widen them with the file, applying sideways pressure. When they do get a bit wrong, it really doesn't matter. It's going to be something that is covered up by the bindings, but it's still better to get it right. I've got the first brace sitting into the first slot, and so I have ever so carefully placed it in there, rocked it forward so that it's centered at the tail, gently rocked it back without sliding so that it's centered at the neck block, and then traced the position of the corresponding end of the same brace. So now we cut that one narrow and check its fit, because that's going to be guiding us as we do the next one, which will guide us as we do the next one, and hopefully we end up aligned correctly at the last. When I file and cut, I'm tilting downwards to account for the tapering of the ends of braces. You want to end up with these things just deep enough for the brace to sit in the channel. If it's too shallow, the surface isn't going to be able to glue properly. If it's too deep, you've got a void that you really don't want. I now have both ends of the first brace sitting in corresponding channels. So this one is a bit tight, however. So I check that the centre line is good there. I'm rocking it from brace to brace until we get down to the end, and I see how far off, and the back piece is a little bit too far that way, which tells me I have to widen it on this side. Okay, so using that set, I've now marked out this set. One way of avoiding confusion that I've noticed with previous builds is that whenever you re-establish or adjust the position of a line, sand away the old line, because it gets real confusing when you've got multiple lines and you don't know which one you just drawn. On the plus side, this method of curved lining buttressing with little slivers of timber has worked much better than anything else I've tried in previous builds, so that's definitely updating the notes. Now that I've got 3 brace ends sitting in channels and it's centered, top and tail, when I rock it back and forth I adjust the lines that I've already drawn, and I see that in this case they need to go a whisker south. That's good, you know, that's what we need to be doing. With 2 entire braces sitting in their channels, it starts to get a little easier, but one never gets complacent. A little easier because there's less degrees of wobble freedom. So, on to this one. Okay, we now have all braces fitting into their channels and being almost perfectly centered top and tail. And these are the cleanest channels that I've ever cut, thanks to this new buttressing technique that we tried out for the first time. We are not going to get it absolutely perfect yet because we have yet to put the sides in the Solera mould and attach something that I like to call the rudder to get the neck block perfectly straight. That may require a little bit more adjustment on some of these channels. What we will do now is exactly the same thing, but for the top. This time it'll be much easier because nothing kind of wobbles around so much because it's flat. I'm going to update my notes to say that this job that you've just seen really needs to be done inside the Solera mould. It makes slightly more difference than I had anticipated. We now have the top fitting, it really only goes one way, so that's good. Before we start gluing anything on, there are 2 additional steps we need. The first is to glue in place our side braces to align with the ends of the back braces. And now we know where the slots are, we can glue those pieces in. The second thing that I shall do is glue in place the final 2 centre strips, because now that we can fit the sides over it, we know how long to make them. I reckon you've seen enough of this happening in the last video, right? There has been some drama. While doing a practice run clamping the back to the sides, I dropped the back and it has developed a fairly small crack along this tail pin centre strip. Had this happened before we glued that piece in, I would have just glued a wider piece. Had I wanted to slide one past you shiftily, I could have just drizzled in some CA. What I am going to do is treat this as not just a build, but a repair video. So I have made 3 little brackets, which I'm going to glue here. They have a little step in, so that they fit over the centre strip like so. So I'm going to glue those in and then we're going to press on.